Hello and welcome to Take You to School with Dr. Tom Prichard. I am your co-host, JP John Paz from the two-man power trip of wrestling. And with me is the star of the show, the former WWE World Tag Team Champion, 8-time Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team Champion, and one of the greatest trainers in the history of professional wrestling, the Doctor of Desire, Tom Prichard. And also joining us is an absolute WWE legend, a former WWE World Champion and World Heavyweight Champion. You may know him as the Mayor. He is our special guest, Glenn Kane Jacobs. Guys, welcome into the show. How you doing?
Doing great. And as always, it is a beautiful night here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Snow covered. We had a white Christmas in beautiful southeast or East Tennessee anyway, and it's a great night.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And of course, the guys that own JPWA, the Jacobs Prichard Wrestling Academy, down there in the beautiful Knoxville, Tennessee. So kind of just to start off, Glenn, you know, this is Dr. Tom's show, but where did you first meet Dr. Tom?
Gosh, I guess it was when I was in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. By that time, Tom was already in WWE with Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey and Jim Cornette as the Heavenly Bodies. But I think they were popping in every now and then and still doing shots for Cornette here in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I think that's right, isn't it, Tom? It was about that time.
Yeah, it was about that time. We were coming in and out, and you were teaming with Al still, but I think you were also making shots up to WWF at that time.
Yes. Yeah, that would have been right. That was 1995, 25 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dr. Tom, what did you think of Glenn when you first saw him? I mean, you're a veteran at this point. He's pretty young to the business. What did you think about him?
Well, yeah, but you had big guys everywhere in WWE, and you knew he just fit the mold. So it was just a matter of time of him getting up there. And my gosh, he looked the part, was the part, wasn't playing a part. So I think everybody, when they saw Glenn, myself included, said he won't be around here very long, meaning Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So once I think the people in charge and the powers that be in WWE or let's just say WWE, took a look at him. They knew they had a place for him on the roster. So it was just a matter of time. I think everybody who saw him felt that way.
Glenn, you were pretty young in Smoky Mountain. What did you think of Dr. Tom? Did you say, hey, I love the Heavenly Bodies, or you weren't as familiar with him?
Yeah.
I loved everything. No, because I loved everything about Smoky Mountain Wrestling. You have to understand that was where the stars were. Okay, I was plodding away in Independence in the Midwest and looking down at Smoky Mountain Wrestling. They had people like Tracy Smothers and the Rock and Roll Express and Tony Anthony, Bullet Bob Armstrong, Brad Armstrong, and the Heavenly Bodies. And it was just like, man, that is a talent-laden promotion. So I was just thrilled to get the opportunity. I'd been in Puerto Rico for 9 months previous to coming to Knoxville. So it was nice to get back into the continental U.S. And then also, I mean, it was just, it's like one of the last of the old territories. And you're based in Knoxville. Actually, I lived in Morristown, which is about half an hour outside of Knoxville. But you made all your shots from there, working every night, which was great. And learning from people, especially, like I said, Tom wasn't around that much, but learning from people like Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson and Tracy Smothers and Tony Anthony, and it was just amazing. And I mean, it was just said to be there at that time with the talent that Cornette had been able to assemble in Smoky Mountain Wrestling was really. I was very fortunate to be able to take part in all that.
Dr. Tom, you said, he fit the mold, he fit right in. What did you think about him as a worker?
Well,
you don't have to answer. You can lie about that one.
Yeah, I think you can see anybody when they start out where they're at as far as green. We're all green. It's not a crime to be green. It's just a matter of how you progress along the way. Same thing when I saw Steve Austin for the first time. Nobody could ever tell he was going to be as big as he ever got, but my gosh, you knew he had something. And I think the same thing with Glenn. You knew he had something. You knew there was that potential there, and it was like big lump of clay just waiting to be molded. And anybody who goes to WWE, especially when they have plans for you or expect to have plans for you, they're going to put you on the path that best suits you, and it's up to you to follow that path and listen to the direction and orchestration that they want you to follow when you're there. And if you're coachable, it's the same thing in any sport or any endeavor. If you're coachable, you listen and be creative along the way, you'll be fine. And I saw that in Glenn early on as Unabomb, and then coming up there as getting a shot with WWE. So, it's some guys get it and some guys don't. But we always say you can't teach 6'8", and if you can learn and listen, and you can be coached, then you're on your way.
One of I think the hardest things about nowadays and the change that the business is going through is back in the day, of course, before you had the internet and all this information and all the behind the scenes look we get right now, when you had the territories and people could go different places and learn and train and get better, because really the way you get polished in professional wrestling is in front of the crowd. You can learn all the moves, you can do all that stuff, but don't learn the art form until you actually get in front of people and experience the theater and the art and getting the emotion out of folks that you want to. And it's really difficult now because, of course, people are immediately, if they're out there, their stuff goes all over the internet, right? And in my case, I came up kind of on the last of that, but still, the great thing about, I think, before then was when you went different places, you had a fresh start. Whereas nowadays, everybody knows everything about everybody. And, just again, from kind of that performance aspect of it, that's something that, I think that when I look back, I wish I would have been able to be, in a period where, by the time I got my big shot in WWE, I hadn't been there for a while. If that makes any sense, that had been kind of a fresh slate, and they were able to do that to some extent. But I feel bad for guys now because, just like Tom said, people get to see that lump of clay when it's still a lump of clay instead of seeing the finished product, and I think that makes it harder nowadays than it was back when I first started.
Yeah, you think about like a guy like Braun Strowman, and it's a guy like that, like really wasn't really trained that much, and he kind of just was thrown out there maybe too soon, and he wasn't really in NXT that long. Right. So it's a lot different now than it was then, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, also the audience now, of course, it's very much of instant gratification. What have you done for me lately? So you look at a guy like Braun or some other people that come up too quickly, and and Braun was able to overcome that. But they may never get the chance that they would have if they were more polished when they got thrust into position.
As far as you guys, and thinking back, I could only find one match that you guys had against each other in Smoky Mountain. Is that it? It was a 4-way elimination: Heavenly Bodies, the Thugs, Unabomb, and Al Snow, and then the Headbangers. Is that it? One match?
Yeah. Well, we go through this on occasion, Glenn. John will throw something at me that I really don't recall. Yeah, it would have to be just one match because I would probably remember others.
I remember being on the same team as you in like 8-man tags, whether it was 4 or 6-man tags when I was with you and Candido, I believe. But
it could have been
us being across the ring.
I don't either. I really don't. It could have been a 4-way tag thing, but I really don't. I don't. So if I would sit here and tell you how great it was, I'd be totally making it up all the way. So yeah.
What did you think about the team of Al Snow and Unabomb, Dr. Tom?
Well, once again, knowing Al, and he at that time was wrestling's best kept secret. Just knowing Al, knowing the kind of person he was and the kind of worker he was, he had a great camp up around Michigan too when he first started, and he was a trainer of guys, including Dan Severin. So I knew that Al was that kind of veteran, and Al knew his position too. Al knew that if he could impart any knowledge that Glenn could pick up, be useful, then that was his job. And I knew that it was up to the guy that Al is next to pick it up and take it for what it's worth. So, as a team, I thought they did very well. Once again, it was the image and the impression. You have Al, who's a hell of a worker and a hell of a heel, and can do anything in the ring and get away with it, and then have this big guy behind him backing him up, and it was a perfect combination. So it was, again, because Smoky Mountain was one of the last territory places to go to, that's really what it was. And you had older guys or guys who'd been around for a little bit. And Al wasn't quite that old, but Al had been around for a little bit. He was the best kept secret in wrestling at that time. And Jimmy knew about him, and he knew if he put him with Glenn, Al would also help Glenn along the way. And once again, it's up to Glenn to take it or leave it. And I'm pretty sure he took a lot of the advice and listened to a lot of the advice and a lot of the stories and a lot of the anecdotes, if you will, that Al gave out. And that's really what it's about. And then go out and do it and experiment on the road with it. And I thought they were a great team, actually.
Glenn, what do you think about teaming with Al at that point? I mean, he's young, but like Dr. Tom said, he's kind of wrestling's best kept secret at that point.
Yeah, he really was. And that helped me out tremendously. Just being around not only Al, but also people that had a lot of experience. And I cannot overstate how amazing it was for me at that point to be able, we had a long Rock and Roll Express, to be able to work with Robert almost every night of the week was amazing. And you have to remember too, Al was at the peak of his career, or getting close to it. We'll go on and have gone to WWE as well as other places. Smoky Mountain was kind of his big break, as far as Tom said, he's best go seeking doing independence, and then it comes down to Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and then from there, goes to WWE, and then on to TNA and other places. But I learned a lot, and just being around people like that, you learn a lot. And as Tom said too, with Al being a trainer as well, and he was able to help me with just not so much moves and that sort of stuff, but psychology and in some cases really how the business works. So that was also, those intangibles that might have been more important than anything else. And we had a good time together too. Once I got comfortable being around Al, and from that aspect, it was enjoyable as well as a learning experience for me.
And you're talking about getting your big break. When you do get your big break and you head up to the WWF, obviously Dr. Tom has been there, but you get your big break, you head up there, but it's not quite what you want. Is that a deterrent at all? Like kind of getting the big break and then, oh great, I have to play the evil dentist. I just can't come.
Yeah, it was originally, initially. I'll never forget going into Vince's, it's actually I go into J.J. Dillon's office, and Vince comes in and we're talking, and he lays out the Isaac Yankem thing for me, and I just literally was deflated, but not trying to show how deflated I was. But I'm there trying to figure out, oh, gosh, how am I going to make this thing work? And realizing that I didn't like it from the beginning, and I wasn't going to be able to make it work. And it probably isn't good when you make that decision as soon as something is presented to you. So a lot of the failure of that character is really due to me, and just the fact that I just couldn't get into it. But nevertheless, as things progressed, and I did not have the best of attitudes at times. And then remember one day, Mark Calloway, the Undertaker, taking me aside and telling me that I better basically get myself in gear because if I didn't, I wasn't going to have a job there very long. And he said he liked me, Vince likes me, all that stuff, but I had to prove that I belonged. And that's when I decided really that, I didn't necessarily have what I wanted, but if I kept moping around, I was never going to get what I wanted. So I had to do the best with what I had, and that's what I tried to do. So even though it initially was not my dream character by any stretch of the imagination. It allowed me to get my foot into the door and, you know, give myself another chance. And it's funny because in life, a lot of times, if you just stay around long enough and keep on getting opportunities, finally a good one comes along and you're able to do something with it. That's what happened in my case.
Dr. Tom, you are no stranger to being handed a bad gimmick with zip and the body done it. So you know that all too well as well.
Well, yeah, I just, I was at a little different point in my career. I was at a little different point in my life too. And it just, but I think the thing that happened with me is sticking around long enough for finding the opportunity to train people came along for me. So Glenn's exactly right. If you stick around long enough, you'll get, something at least a little more palatable, I think. And we've all, and I've said this before, everything's a test. And in this business, hell, life's a test. It's not about how your opportunities, it's how you react to your opportunities, what I'm trying to say. And it's all about having the right attitude and believing you can, believing something else is better and on the way. And, that's true in this business, and it is true in life. So yeah, I wasn't real happy with a lot of things in my run up there, but at the same time, in the end, I got an opportunity, and it was up to me to make it work. And I did what I did. Can't take anything back. And I got a great opportunity to find something new that I really came to enjoy, and that's training and coaching. And this is like no other business in the world, especially when you get somebody who has that potential and you can draw it out of them, or you can help them along the way, or just say one thing to them and get them inspired to create. That was the opportunity I was looking for, and it just opened other doors down the line.
You know, if I could interject too, it's funny how, just like everything else, is how the wrestling business works. And when we talk about these bad characters, we have to remember where WWE was at that point. I mean, it was very gimmick driven and really over the top and cartoonish characters. And then Tom and I kind of got the end part of that. Beginning to hit people like T.J. Hopper, Tony Anthony and T.J. Hopper, and the Goon, and these other just Duke the Drumster Drozen, over the top characters. And then within like 2 years, everything had swung completely the other way. And it had gone from a very PG product to very cutting edge with Stone Cold Steve Austin, ushering in the era of the anti-hero. So it's amazing to watch kind of the ebbs and flows of the wrestling business and how much it changed over time. And then at some points over a very short period of time. And just I think Tom and I were caught in that last bit of the transition from the over the top, really cartoonish stuff into the much more reality based cutting edge stuff.
And you both played such a pivotal role. If you think about the Attitude Era, Dr. Tom, that's when you start taking over the training. Glenn, you become Kane, one of the greatest gimmicks of all time. The pairing with The Undertaker was one of the greatest feuds of all time, if not the greatest feud of all time. It's just one of those things. You both played such a big role in that Attitude Era.
Well, I was extremely fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. And it really was part of history, right? I mean, I think back around that era, and one of the memories that always stands out to me is we sold out, I forget how many straight nights. I mean, everywhere we went, it was insane. And Paul Bearer and I were pulling in to the arena in Greensboro, North Carolina, the Coliseum, which is a very historic course, had the first arcade there and all this stuff. Man, I'll never forget going out. I mean, everything's packed, and just going out that night. And this is just a house show. This is like Thursday night in Greensboro, North Carolina. It's a 15,000 seat arena or whatever it is. And you can look out. Everything is packed, and there's people standing in the vomitories. It was literally standing room only, and it was like that everywhere. And it was just an amazing period to be part of. And I always say that we weren't just at the top of the wrestling business. Wrestling was at the top of the entertainment industry. I mean, it was the hottest thing going, and I was just really again, just really fortunate to be there at the right time among all the different stars, and just an incredible time in the wrestling industry, really, I think, in the entertainment business.
And Dr. Tom, you were right there, you know, being the trainer, training Vince, training Shane, training The Rock, training Kurt Angle. Did you see, you know, this huge boom coming, or were you just kind of shocked by how crazy it got and how big it got so quickly?
Well, I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, and I've seen wrestling in Texas when it was really on fire, and I've seen when it was okay, and then I've seen it when it was just at the bottom. So I was so fortunate, again, I'll say that too, to be a part of the company and to be able to travel and go on the road and do voiceovers and be an intricate part of the company, go to the Titan Towers, living in Stamford. So during that time period, it was exciting just to be there, seeing how things were going and watching these guys, again, like The Undertaker and Kane and Austin and Rock and Hunter and Shawn and Brett and Mankind and all these authentic characters who weren't necessarily going out there being hokey, but they were larger than life, and they didn't break. They didn't wink and a nod at you. They went out and they performed where people were actually excited, invested, came out in droves, and the energy in the buildings would make the hair on your arms and the back of your neck stand up. It was just so exciting during that period of time. I remember in Madison Square Garden, WrestleMania 20, when it was Kane versus Undertaker, and this is after Taker's coming back, and I went out into the arena just to watch Taker's entrance. It was incredible, the sound, but that was like that everywhere that they went. Everywhere WWE went back at that time, it was like that, because the energy was going, the vibe was right on track with what everybody was feeling, and the guys gave the fans a reason to get into it, because there was real competitiveness, maybe not competition necessarily, but there was competitiveness to go out and have the best match on the card. And you can see it from the first match all the way up to the main event, because I used to watch them all the time, and just to get that rhythm and see what they were falling into. And nobody was falling into phoning it in. Everybody went out and worked hard every night, and you could see it, you could feel it, and so could everybody who came out and watched it.
Glenn, what did you think of the retirement? I know you were a part of it, but speaking about The Undertaker and the legendary Great Feud and everything, what did you think about the retirement of Mark The Undertaker?
It's bittersweet, because I'm happy for Mark, and the fact that not many folks get to retire on their own terms and leave the business the way they want to. So I'm very happy about that. I think he's in a good place. That's, for a personal level, that's great, but as a fan, it kind of stinks, because it's The Undertaker, right? And he's one of my favorites, not only just because of our personal history, but also just as a fan. I think easily the greatest wrestling character ever, and also the guy, man, from when he debuted all the way through. He might not have always been the number one guy, but he was always number 1A if he wasn't, and just carried the company through all the cycles in wrestling. And when you look back, and he came in and things were hitting the end of Hulkamania, and then things went really down in the early 90s, but he was there, and then when it comes back up, he's there, and been there ever since. So it was just bittersweet. And then also, of course, with the pandemic, and I think WWE has actually done the best out of the spectator sports of trying to have the feel of a live audience. I mean, they really have done a good job with the Thunderdome concept. But nevertheless, I mean, that was certainly, we would have liked to had 20,000 people there as opposed to 4,000 people watching on monitors. But nevertheless, I mean, the whole thing, of course, was done very well. So in the end, it's just like I said, it's bittersweet for me.
Now, were you supposed to be in character in gimmick, or was that a rib at all?
No. I was supposed to be.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, Kane is Kane, and he played different incarnations, and all that. That was the reason for that, because Kane and Undertaker, and I think you pulled back the veil so much that sometimes we forget that. But that's what kind of separates them, I think, from a lot of the other performers, is the fact that they're truly characters. And I know people speculated, but that had been the plan all along. So it's one of those things. I think sometimes people get to speculating and outthink themselves a little too much into it.
But I think too, on that note, once you put a mask on, or once you get into that, your trunks or your jacket or whatever you're going to wear, if it's a specific character or persona, whatever it may be, it's not that hard to transform, and it's not that hard to switch, especially when you have those iconic characters. I don't know that you can name any other iconic characters other than, let me just say, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but Bruno Sammartino and Hulk Hogan. You have the Undertaker and Kane. I don't know if there's anybody as iconic. Maybe Austin, maybe Rock, but it's in that level. It's at that level, and I agree 100%. When you go out and when you have to become Kane, it's the same way as Austin when he's sitting at the ranch. He may not be romping and stomping, but when it comes time for the glass to break and he's at an arena and he's in the mood, and it just, something comes over you. And I believe that's why the characters have lasted so long, or these two icons have lasted so long, because they are authentic and they have become one and the same.
See, the rib would have been if I'd have gone to Orlando and wear all my stuff, and then they would have said, "Oh, you're just going to go out like that." I'd have been like, "Wait a second, no, I'm not doing that for Undertaker's retirement."
Yeah. Yeah, I don't rib, and I don't want to be ribbed. Right. Yeah.
Glenn, what was it like being there for that? 'Cause I knew you said it's bittersweet, but what did you think about the cool video they played, him coming out, Paul Bearer being on the hologram? What did you think about the way they executed it?
Yeah, it was excellent. It really was. And I think it was as good a segment as could have been done. And WWE always does stuff like that first class. Again, just looking back over his entire career, and then they had the video, and then the Paul Bearer deal. I thought it was very well done. And, I also, even backstage among a bunch of tough wrestling guys, weren't many dry eyes.
And Dr. Tom, I know you liked that tribute as well. Because we had been talking about how excellent they do the production, and especially for Undertaker. I mean, it's kind of hard not, to screw it up, because he had such a great career, but of course they knock it out of the park.
Yeah, I would expect nothing less from those guys. Once you have a chance to see the studio in Stamford, and then when they go on the road, I mean, the work ethic is it's on par with any movie studio, production studio in the country, in the world, and everybody understands that it's about quality, and it's about making things special, and making people smile, making you feel something, making that emotional tie, that emotional contact. And I don't believe WWE can be beat. They might be able to be matched, but I don't think anybody can beat them when it comes to making that emotional contact. Now, they don't always hit it out of the park every time, but more times than not, they're cognizant of the fact that this is what they do, and it is to get an emotional reaction. It is to make people smile. It is to make people want to tune back in and get connected with the product. And when you have larger than life human beings going out and eliciting that effect, getting that emotion, and getting that reaction. Again, back in the Attitude Era, when the show was hot, the people were hot, and you could feel it. It was deafening. and it was great. And when I was watching, standing backstage, I can only imagine how the guys in the ring were feeling, because there's nothing better than getting into an arena where the people are into your match, and you could do no wrong, because everything you did and everything they did meant something. And to the people, to the fans who really enjoyed WWE at that time, I don't think anyone left the arena disappointed.
Glenn, were you shocked at all? Just not really of your career, but if you just think about it, Undertaker's career at WWE spans 30 years, such longevity, such a legendary career, one of the greatest careers ever. But then yours, who are also attached to his career, is going, 25 years strong. Isn't that just amazing when you think back? Like, wow, what longevity kind of was birthed off of that Undertaker 1990 character?
Yeah, absolutely. I never would have imagined that my career would have lasted as long as it did. I'm sure if you asked Mark, he would have probably said the same thing. So it's just been amazing. And then Tom will probably tell you this too, but probably the most amazing thing, though, is how quickly it goes by. I mean, 25 years is a long time. And then when I look back, man, it just almost felt like a blink of the eye, because everything's moving so quickly all the time. But I had the opportunity to perform with so many just great talents, to travel the world, to meet all sorts of people from around the world, the fans from all the way around the world. I've learned, it's funny, but from my travels, I've learned that people are pretty much people everywhere you go. And WWE is actually like this ambassador of goodwill, because we can go to places that normally you would think geopolitically we wouldn't get along, but the people in the arena are all there for the same reason, and they're all rabid fans of WWE. So we have this common touch point, and it's just been an amazing experience. But no, I never expected it to last anywhere nearly as long as it did.
When you think about Dr. Tom, and Glenn, this question for you, when you think about Dr. Tom, were you paying attention to him training the guys? Were you cognizant of what was going on, behind the scenes, as far as the guys coming up, like the Rocks of the world and the Kurt Angles?
Oh, absolutely. We all knew what Tom was doing, and I went down a couple times and actually visited the training center when it was in different locations, and see it. And of course, it's evolved over the years. Back when Tom first started there, of course, you had the warehouse in Stamford, and then things moved down to Georgia, outside Atlanta. And I remember the first time that I went, and it was basically a ring in a warehouse, and had garbage bags covering the windows out front and all this stuff. And then it would grow and get bigger from there. But yeah, I think we're extremely fortunate to have someone like Tom, who could work with people. I mean, Angle and Rock and Mark Henry and all these different people, so that by the time they got to the main roster, they at least had a very good foundation from which to work from. And then too, I think that especially during their early years, all those guys would also stay in touch with Tom, and I'm sure that he gave a pep talk here or there, even when they got up to the main roster.
Yeah, well, that was my job too, going on the road with those guys and working. A couple of weeks, and I was talking not too long ago about Achim Albrecht giving me a concussion.
Yeah.
The first night of the tour, I had to go 2 weeks with him, and it was like, oh my God. So yeah, it was definitely an experience for me too. But I think you came down to the studio one time, and right as you're working as Kane, and I took the tombstone, I think maybe 7 times or 8 times in a row, and just trying to get the correlation between the mat and where I needed to land. I think it took about 8 times. I don't know, I'm not sure, but I took it a few times.
Glenn, when you see, Dr. Tom is training these guys, are you keeping that in mind for the future? Are you thinking about obviously JPWA? Are you thinking about that, in the future, maybe Dr. Tom is the guy if I'm going to do something outside of wrestling to do some training once my career is up? Is that something that's just kind of stored in the memory bank? Like, he's an awesome trainer. He's the guy I want.
Well, kind of. Really, what happened was we were both living in Knoxville, and I just called Tom literally one day. I'm like, dude, why aren't you training right now? And he just wasn't. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, so he's like one of the very best at this. And I think that it's a waste if he's not doing that, if he's not training people. So one thing led to another, and we decided to start this thing. But it was just one of those deals where we live in the same town,
right?
And I was just going, man, why isn't Tom doing this? And it's also what he loves to do. So I thought it was just a good opportunity for all of us.
Dr. Tom, what did you think when he kind of called you and made the pitch?
Well, I wasn't. I'd done it before, and I've mentioned this before. It's one of those things where it's got to be the right timing, and it's got to be the right thing, and it's got to be all in or nothing. And because too many people say they want to, and they don't know they don't mean it, but they don't mean it. So we wanted to be different than a lot of the schools that just go in and play around for 2 or 3 days. And as we started talking about it, I thought if we do 5 days a week, and originally it was going to be Monday and Tuesday with Wednesday off, and then come in on a Sunday and do promos. And it's a lot to be a professional wrestler. And in 12 weeks, you're not going to learn everything. So all these things are rushing through my mind. What am I going to do for 12 weeks with these guys? And then what do we do once they're done with 12 weeks? So there was a lot I had to think about. But when I saw and heard that Glenn believed it could be done, then I went around and had to start taking my own advice. If you believe you can do it, you can. If you don't believe, well, that's true too. And I had to think that way. I had to think, we can do this, and it's just a matter of doing it, and it's a matter of believing it. And there might be some downtime, there might be some tough times, but it is what I love to do, and I still love the business. It's changed over the years, no doubt, but the basics and fundamentals never go out of style. You're always going to need that. It's still batting practice, fielding the ball. You're still blocking and tackling. You're still trying to shoot a ball through a hoop. So, I mean, how do you get to that point? And those are all the things that went through my mind. And finally, I said, yeah, why not? So the next step was finding a place to do it, and then just doing it. And so it's been great. And I'm happy you suggested it. I'm happy that we are doing it.
Glenn, what do you think about the progress of the JPWA so far? I know Emily Andrulis is in WWE, but or NXT really, but what do you kind of think of the progress of JPWA?
I think the most important thing is everybody that works with Tom feels like himself for them, okay? That he's, whether they're ever going to go on and do anything else, that he's given them a great experience and he's invested in them. And so much of the wrestling business, when we're talking about who's going to be a big star, I mean, there's intangibles, there's all these different things, so you never can tell. And I just think the most important thing is that everybody comes away feeling like that Tom works with them and cares about them. And it's funny too, because you see the relationships that are built and the classes come together as individuals and as a group. So that's the most important thing, is just no matter what, to feel like the people who go through the program have had a good experience. And, sooner or later, you're going to get someone who's going to be the next big star, hopefully. But even if that doesn't happen, it's okay, because you just want everyone to know that you've done the best you can for them, and Tom definitely does that.
Dr. Tom, what do you think about progress report of the JPWA?
Well, I would agree. We've had some great progress come out of the JPWA. We've had some guys who just like everybody else, who won't stop at anything. And we've had people who just wanted the experience. So I think we're right where we should be. We're starting our third year next week, and it takes a while to build up, but I think we're doing great, and I think we're going to continue to do great. And I think the way we do that is get the word out from the people who have trained with us. And I don't solicit anybody to say anything other than what they feel. If they liked it, they liked it. And if they didn't, I understand that too, because I tell everybody the ropes are what they are, and it's hard when you fall down sometimes. But there's other things we do besides just that. And a lot of it's just getting the experience. So I'm pretty happy with it so far.
And Glenn, it seems like Knoxville, Tennessee is both of yours kind of favorite place, but you went there for Smoky Mountain and you never left. You must love Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, East Tennessee is a beautiful place. The people here are wonderful, and this is home. And actually, at this point in my life, I can't imagine living anywhere else.
Dr. Tom, I know we always talk about, but you love Knoxville, Tennessee more than anybody. You left, you came back, and you're loving it.
Well, again, you have the mountains, you have Sevierville, Pigeon Forge right down the road, you have Merrill. There's a lot of beautiful things here in Tennessee, and there's a lot of things to do. So when you come in to Knoxville, if you just look around, you can't help but feel welcome. And that's what I felt the first time I was here. And that's we came back a few years ago, about 8 years ago, because this was where we wanted to stay, and this is where we wanted to be. And yeah, it's a great place to be. It really is.
I had to bring this up because of the unfortunate passing of John Huber, a.k.a. Luke Harper, a.k.a. Brody Lee. Recently just passed, we're taping this as of yesterday, the news came out, very, very shocking. He was only 41 years old. Glenn, I know you wrestled him a ton over the last couple of years. What did you kind of think when the unfortunate passing of Luke Harper, a.k.a. Brody Lee, happened?
Yeah, I was shocked. A friend of mine texted me and told me, and I was like, there's no way. And John he was a really good guy. He was just a sweetheart, just a good person. 2020 has been an awful year. Of course, Pat Patterson recently passing away. So it's just been, with everything going on, it's been a terrible year. And this added to it. Like I said, John was a great guy, had a wonderful family, and I don't know what else to say.
Seems like a lot of people are saying that he was he looked like such a tough guy, but behind the scenes, he seemed like everybody's favorite, like whether in AEW or WWE.
He was just a sweetheart. Just, like I said, just a really decent human being.
You trained him too, right?
Yeah, in FCW, and I was gonna make the comparison between John and Bobby Eaton. I don't think anybody's ever said a bad word about Bobby Eaton either, and it's the same way with John. He in FCW, he was the model student, the guy that you love to talk to and coach and be around. So it's a shame when anything like that happens. And 41 years old, 2 kids and a wife, Christmas time, I couldn't think of anything that it's a nightmare for everybody who knew him.
Yeah, definitely condolences out to his family. That's just shocking to hear that because he was so young, but you're hearing all these outpouring of just funny stories that he would do and say, and his little signature poses and just the things he'd say before he'd be leaving to go to one town to another. He would always say to the guy, "Goodbye forever." Just seemed like a very lighthearted, very funny guy. He was very family focused.
Yeah, he was. He was one of those people. I don't think I ever saw him in a bad mood. And like I said, always had something to say that would brighten your spirits and make you laugh. So.
Yeah, for sure. And Dr. Tom, you just trained him in FCW. Did you have any other time with him?
No. I met him in Tampa, and that's where he and Bray and Eric got together, and that's where the Wyatt family first made their run through. So they've been together for a while, and I really don't know what else to say about it except it is tragic and it is sad, and we lost a good one and lost a really good guy, and it's happening. It happens. It is life, but it's happening too often, or it feels like it's happening too often. Maybe it's because it is 2020, and maybe it's just because I'm ready for it to end too, and just ready to get back to normal, whenever that'll be. But yeah, it was just too sad.
For sure. And Glenn, you mentioned the passing of Pat Patterson as well. Obviously, it's a completely different scenario and different situation. But what kind of relationship did you have with Pat?
Well, I was very fortunate to know Pat, and of course, he was influential on my career as a booker, as a mentor, even some in-ring stuff when he and Jerry Briscoe were together, which is always a lot of fun. But I mean, Pat's literally, he really is a legend. And I think that sometimes we use that term a little too loosely, but definitely in his case, it certainly applies. And WWE and the world of professional wrestling wouldn't be what it is. And none of us would have had the enjoyment of the years of WWE that we would have if it hadn't been for Pat Patterson.
As far as kind of Kane, Undertaker, did he, like you always hear stories about him helping matches, whether it's Hogan and Warrior, Bret and HBK, all these different guys, Angle, like him. Did he help you guys at all?
Oh yeah,
in like with the matches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was still there, of course, on a full-time basis when I came in 1995 as Isaac Yankem, and then in 1997 with the Kane character. Yeah, he was there all through that, whether it was booking, being part of booking, creative team, as a producer of matches. Yeah, he was through all of that stuff.
I always just look at that era with Kane and The Undertaker and think like, okay, it's the Attitude Era. There's so much realism, but they're quote unquote supernatural characters, but you almost thought that it was so real, like especially when you throw Paul Bearer in there. There was just something about it, just worked. It clicked, and other people have tried to kind of mimic it or copy it, but it was just the perfect timing and the perfect feud, right? I mean, it's weird. It's like so everything's so real, but you guys are supernatural, but somehow made it seem so real.
Yeah, it's very ironic. Taker and I were just talking about this not too long ago, but that's just hitting on the head. I mean, it was almost like Kane and Undertaker occupied this separate universe from the rest of WWE, and at least when they're together or opposing one another. And it was just wild because, yeah, they were the two characters. They had like this mythology, and people still bought into it, even though everything was so reality-based. But I think that the characters were done so well and everything about it was done so well that it's still, a lot of what we do is just like imagine. As long as when people don't see the wires, they'll accept it. But of course, if you've been out there where the wires are, well, then the magic trick doesn't work anymore. And I think that we were just able, and very fortunate, to be able to, take this reality-based product and kind of turn it around to where you have the mythological creature that they're in this reality-based product, but then they all kind of work together. And it shouldn't have. We got, we're throwing lightning bolts and fireballs, which is ridiculous, but it seemed to work. But the whole Undertaker deal, they had professional wrestling too. And I think that a lot of that's just a tribute to him and his ability and just making a character, which is an unbelievable character, but executing the character so well that it's a believable character.
Well, real quick, let me just add to that. Besides just doing lightning bolts and fireballs and doing all the magic and the great looking garnish, if you will. When you got in the ring, you were also throwing clotheslines and diving over the top rope and laying things in that were authentic and made things look the part, so people weren't going, oh my gosh. It wasn't a letdown once the bell rang. In other words, you followed through with everything from start to finish, and that's one of the things we stress, especially when watching a match between two people getting in the ring. What's going to get anybody invested who's watching? What's going to make the whole thing work? I just listened to something the other day where they were talking about Mordecai. If you remember Kevin Thorne, he had a great entrance. He had a great look. He had a great costume. He had great everything. And then the bell rang. So that was the difference. You have to be able to carry it out. You have to be able to follow through. So you can't just go out and say, hey, I've got a character like Kane or like the Undertaker. No, it can't be that. You have to find that character and you have to follow through with it where people can connect with it and see it and realize, oh, this is something to watch.
Yeah. And I think too, with a guy like Undertaker, he was so athletic for someone of his size. And when he first came to WWE in, I guess, 91, and he had a lot of big guys, but none of them move like that. So, and he did that on purpose. He'd be very methodical, and then all of a sudden it's explosive. But, you've got this guy that's, 6'8". He's walking the top rope and doing leapfrogs and all this crazy stuff, which is almost superhuman in and of itself. And then I think the Kane Undertaker story, two brothers, it's about sibling rivalry. And I think that no matter what level you put it on, whether it's mythology, whether it's in our own households, I think that we can all relate to that. So much of it was just due to magnificent storytelling that WWE did throughout that entire feud or rivalry that lasted all those many years.
And quite possibly the greatest WWE debut of all time. I know Undertaker had a great one at Survivor Series, but your debut is got to be up there as one of the greatest debuts of all time as well.
I'm partial. I think it was, but it wasn't due to me though. It was the story had been in the process of being told for months, with Paul Bearer talking about Kane and this ginormous buildup, and you have all this stuff with Kane happening and seeds for the planet, and then veer off into Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, which is a huge matchup, never been done before. And they quit talking about Kane for a couple of weeks, and everybody forgot about Kane. And then all of a sudden, bam, there's Kane. And just everything was done so well, and the execution was really well done. But I think, again, it was just because the story was so strong, the story leading up to the debut. If a masked guy walks out and rips a cell door off, big deal, right? But when the guy's Kane and he's Undertaker's long lost brother and no one quite knows what's going on, but they know, oh my gosh, this dude's like big as the Undertaker and all this stuff. And Undertaker actually looks like, if he isn't scared, well, then something weird's going on. And then he gets picked up and dropped on his head and beat with his own move. I mean, that never happens. So it was just extremely well executed on many different levels, I think.
Such a memorable, the match itself is so memorable, but that moment is just crazy memorable. And obviously Vince, that's got to be Kane. He says it a few times, but he says, that's got to be Kane. So, it's one of those things that's just etched in just memory of, especially me as a fan, just from Vince's voice and then you executing it. Were you nervous at all? Because, this is a huge spot. Plus, in the middle of the Monday Night War, in the middle of the war with WCW, your character is going to play a huge role. So it's almost like, you don't screw this up. Here you go.
Yeah, that was actually my thought. Just don't screw it up. Because especially I'm going out, the whole Hell in a Cell that was designed for Kane, right? No one could get in, no one could get out, but no one could get in. Because the real thought was Shawn's people coming down and beating Undertaker. That's no one ever thought that you'd have Kane come out and rip the cell door off. But then those guys have like this amazing match, first ever Hell in a Cell match, and the match is unbelievable. And then here I come, and yeah, my entire thing just don't screw this up, because this is the best opportunity anyone's ever been given in history of professional wrestling.
And Dr. Tom, you're probably thinking, oh, when I got my, ass handed to me from the Steiner brothers, that was a pretty good WWE debut as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't think it's on the same level, but we'll go there. Yeah, no, it was great.
You just think about like Undertaker and Kane, and obviously one of the greatest feuds. But if you look at it, it's just that era. You guys are on fire. You got Austin McMahon, which is coming right around the corner. Then your feuds. Then you got DX and the Nation. I mean, you guys are pretty spot on and pretty on fire. But of course, Undertaker and Kane always kind of were there, either at the top of the card, whether you're winning the WWF title from Austin or, tagging with Undertaker. So many memorable moments for sure. And I'll never forget when you won the world title, because I was absolutely shocked that you beat my man, Stone Cold Steve Austin, that night.
Yeah, of course. And everybody was, right? And then the next night to lose it back. But I always said that the next night was actually cooler, because, that was in Cleveland at whatever it is, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, whatever it was the old Gund Arena. And man, that was the most electric crowd that I've ever been in front of. I mean, it was just amazing. And I feel that kind of helped propel everything upwards, because, it just, if I lost to Austin, I lost him with a Kane, who cares, but to beat Austin, of course, with Undertaker's help, and then the next night lose it back to Austin, but then you plant seeds for Brothers of Destruction, because that was the first time really that you could see that Kane and Undertaker might be on the same page. It was just an amazing night. And I'll never forget, just having the world championship, right? And that night, and staying at the Red Roof Inn in Pittsburgh, and I got a double room, and I put the belt on its own bed and everything, and kind of tucked it in. It's pretty cool.
But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but it was just Austin. I mean, it was just awesome. Because Austin was on a rocket ship going straight to the moon, and just to be part of all that was pretty amazing. Then, of course, though, that no one remembers that, because that was the same night that Mick flew off the cage and then went through the cage. So to this day, I'm still pretty hot at Mick Foley, because no one remembers that I won my first world championship the same night that he had the Hell in a Cell and went off of it twice. But anyway, it was a pretty amazing night. And we've been saying this whole thing, though, the whole Attitude Era, I mean, it was filled with moments like that.
Unbelievable. And I just remember we're at summer camp, football camp, and I remember everyone wanted to turn on. I mean, there's a room and there's a ton of people. I mean, all the kids in the team and even other players and stuff too. I mean, they all want to see what the heck was going on Raw. So this shows you how invested you are as a fan. The whole room erupted when you end up losing the next night to Steve Austin on Raw, and he wins by title. We were all just going nuts. But it shows you the emotional investment. All these guys together, get the TV, get it on. We want to see this match. Everyone wanted to see you lose. I mean, it was a great moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Dr. Tom, anything you want to kind of close and say to Glenn as we head towards the finish, head towards the wind down?
Well, once again, I think that JPWA is right on track with what we wanted to do and what we want to do. And, with everything going on in the world today, we're doing the best we can. And I appreciate Glenn offering and being supportive as he has been for everybody with JPWA. And I think as we go on, as we continue on, we can only see what happens and go from there. So 3 years starting next week, and that'll be January 4th. We still have some places available, spots available. If you go to jpwrestlingacademy.com, check it out. Send us an application. Send us an email at jpwrestlingacademy@gmail.com. And I think the third year, hopefully 2021, has to be a hell of a lot better than 2020, I think. Has to be.
No doubt about that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, just echoing what Tom said, anyone that comes to the JPWA, they're going to get trained by the best. There's just no doubt about that. And I think they're going to have a wonderful experience, and they're also going to make friendships that are going to last a lifetime. So I wish I was actually trained by Dean Malenko, which is a wonderful experience in itself. But I wish that more people had the opportunity to go to places like JPWA and get trained by someone like Tom Prichard and just experience. Like I said, it really is. What I see is by the end of the 12 weeks that the students really become family. And I think that's probably as important as anything. And I think they'll say the same thing if you ask them that.